In this video, we are going to walk through the exclusive right to sell listing agreement for a residential property. So what you're going to need when you are completing this form is the tax record for the property that you will be listing so that you can pull the appropriate county information as far as legal description to populate your listing agreement. So I will bounce between that and this for the very first part of this video. So on the exclusive right to sell listing agreement, the very first section where it talks about lot, block, and addition, we are going to go to the realist report for the property in question, and you will find the legal description here. So this is going to be the neighborhood right here, and that's going to be the neighborhood, and if there's a phase or a section that will be added. You can also see that up here where it says subdivision, and then it lists it right here, and then the lot and block numbers are going to be written here. So in this case, this would be the subdivision would be the Grove phase 4, and then the lot would be 20 and the block would be 10. So let's go to our listing agreement here. You see lot, block, addition, and then you're simply going to use the city from the property address, the county. So if we look back at the property record, the county is always listed at the very top, as well as the actual physical address of the property is always listed here at the very top of the record as well. So you can fill out the city, the county, and then this line here is the actual physical address and the zip code to end. Now, the next section of the listing agreement is any items that are reserved. Excuse me. So in that section, you are going to note anything that the seller is supposed to leave behind for the buyer, but wants to reserve and take with them. This is a very important conversation to have with your seller up front, so we don't have any angry sellers when it comes to closing day. Common things that we see disputes over that we need to talk about are going to be curtains. Curtains are to stay and be left behind for the buyer. Refrigerators are to go with the seller. Mounted speakers with like a surround sound system are to stay with the home and be transferred to the buyer. Mounted security cameras or security systems are to stay and transfer to the buyer. So if you see any of these things, we just need to have these conversations with our sellers to make sure that they do not want to take any of those things with them. And if they do, we need to make sure that they are not only reserved here in the listing agreement, but we also need to make sure that we reserve them in the MLS, in the realtor notes, and then we also need to make sure that they are noted in the final purchase contract between the buyer and the seller. Very important to note these across the board. Now, section 4 is going to be where we're going to put the list price. This is going to be the price after you've completed your market analysis on the property that you and the seller have agreed to list the house for. Now, section 5, this is the date that the listing agreement is going to be signed. Now, I highly recommend that you get the listing agreement to be effective immediately upon you guys agreeing to work together. It could be several weeks for them to get the house ready to list, but we want to get this listing agreement and get the agreement between the two of you to contract. And then in part B, I recommend keeping that at 6 months from when the house is going to go active in the MLS. Now, We do need to make sure if the date that the listing agreement is effective is not going to be within 48 hours of it going active in the MLS, that we make sure we note that later on in this document. I'll show you where to note that. But as soon as you start providing services to the client, we want to make sure we have an agreement signed, whether it's staging services, helping them prep their home, consultations about getting everything ready to get the home sold. So make sure we put our listing agreements effective immediately. Now, every single page of this listing contract will be initialed at the bottom, and every single page will have the property address at the top. This next section is about the broker duties and responsibilities. We are not allowed in our office to waive any of those. So that whole section will stay as written. And the next section is about your duties and responsibilities. If you bring the buyer to your own listing, we have very specific rules in our office about how to handle that. And I just want to remind you that if you have a listing and there's a potential that you can bring the buyer to your own listing, you need to get with myself, with Leslie, or with Pam, or any of the leadership in our office immediately, so we can navigate you through that process, because it can become very tricky and you can get yourself into some trouble if you do not get everybody involved and make sure we handle that properly. Now, regarding commission, that is section 8. So this is compensation to the broker. You, as the listing agent, collect the total commission, and then you pay the buyer's agent their commission. We at Keller Williams will always pay our co-op agent 3%. So at a minimum, you have to give whomever brings the buyer 3%. And then you charge whatever you are going to take as your own compensation to list the property on top of that. Okay, so if you are charging 3% on your side, and then you have to pay 3% to the buyer's agent, then you charge 6%. If you are taking 2.5% on your side, and you always will pay 3% on the other side, then you write 5.5% there. But just keep in mind that we cannot reduce the commission that we pay to the buyer's agent. So it must always be 3 to the buyer's agent. You can choose what you compensate yourself on top of that. So just keep that in mind when you're writing that in there. Now, this next section that we need to fill in is going to be section 8, letter D. And what this is stating is that if in fact this listing agreement expires, but you're working with a buyer who's very interested in the house, they just haven't been able to write an offer on it. Maybe they had a house to sell, or maybe they had financing to get in order or something like that. You want to give yourself an opportunity to still bring that buyer and get paid. So what this says is that, and I like to use the numbers 7 and 45. Now you can use whatever numbers you want, but this is basically saying that within 7 days after expiration of this listing agreement, then you will get the buyer a list of names of people that you are potentially working with that may be interested in the property. And then if within 45 days they close on the property, they will agree to compensate you according to this listing agreement. But it's very important that you provide them with a list of those names, and then you get them that contract within those time periods. So you can set those dates what you want. Those are just the suggested timelines. The next section here is just noting that you will be listing the property in the Oklahoma MLS, and it's giving the seller giving you permission to put it in our multi-list service. The very next section is giving access, the seller giving permission to access the property. And so it's saying, yes, you are authorized to put a key box on the property. Now you can put any type of key box that you want. You can use a super box. You can use a combination box, or if they have a keypad keyless entry, you can use that. Now, the super key box provides the highest level of security because only a realtor can access that key box using their Supra app on their phone. So the code can't be shared, it can't be seen by a buyer who can get back into the home at a later date. It is the most secure way to protect our listings. If we are using combo boxes or keypad entries, we do need to explain the risks to our buyer, or I'm sorry, to our sellers, that it is very easy for those combos to the keyless entry or to those combo box to get compromised, and therefore compromise the security of their home. So I highly recommend that we use the super boxes. And if you're not going to use a super box, we need to let them know the potential risks of not using that. The next section that we need to fill in, and we do this section in conjunction with the seller, is finding out whether or not the home is in a mandatory homeowners association. And if it is, finding out what the dues are and how frequently they are paid. Then the next section, part E, is are there any special assessments due on the property? If there are any special assessments due on the property, then how much are they? As far as the unpaid balance. Part F is this in a historical area that is designated as a historical preservation district? Or G, is this in a municipal special design district? And your sellers will know that because they will obviously have to get special approval if they want to make any changes or modifications to their property. They'll have placards designating that it's a historically preserved home. So they should know that if their home is located in one of those areas. Section 17 is one that often gets looked over, but this is whether or not your seller wants to add a residential service contract or a home warranty to the property during the time that the property is listed. Now, the good thing is many of the home warranties cost the sellers nothing to put it in place at the time of listing. And that is something that we do cover in class and that I highly recommend that you inquire about because it could be a huge value to your sellers and help you keep deals together. But this is just the option of, do they want to put a home warranty in place or do they not want to put a home warranty in place at the time of listing? Now, section 18, this is where we write any additional information. And like we talked about before on the first page of where we put the listing agreement effective date, if that effective date is not within 2 business days of when it will go active on the MLS, then you need to note in the special information section 18, property shall go active in the MLS on, and put the date that the property is going to go active. You cannot have a listing agreement that does not note when your property is going to be active in the MLS. So make sure if it's not at the time the agreement is being signed, that we have that noted here in our special information section. In section 25, again, another section that often gets overlooked when we're filling out this contract. This is whether or not the seller authorizes you, the listing agent, to disclose if there are multiple offers received on the property. This is a great opportunity to have the discussion with your seller about the multiple offer process and to discuss with them, if we do receive multiple offers, how they would like to handle that. And then note, do you authorize me to disclose, yes, we have multiple offers, or do you not want me to disclose if we have multiple offers on the property? Again, it's the seller's discretion whether or not you do let other agents know if we are in a multiple offer situation. And then the very last section here is the seller's contact information, and then you, the listing information, listing agent's contact information.